The film opens in Ohio, where a young woman named Margaret St. James escapes from the house where she was held captive. She runs into the street and gets a woman to stop and help her, and she sees that Margaret's right hand has been severed. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, a couple named John and Sarah Bloom are heading to the hospital for their baby's arrival. When Sarah goes into labor, Ohio police arrive outside the house of Edward Skarka, the man who have taken Margaret. He gets out of the house naked to surrender with something behind his back as officers pointed their guns on him. Skarka raises his hand and is shot by the officers. They see that he is holding Margaret's hand. Moments after Skarka's death, the Bloom's son, Miles, is born with blood in the same spot where Skarka was shot. Over time, Miles becomes an unusually calm child. He doesn't cry when getting vaccine shots or just never cries. He also exhibits disturbing behavior, such as catching a spider only to crush it, and then speaking Hungarian in his sleep. Sarah also notes to her friend that Miles has heterochromia, a condition of having two different eye colors. Miles grows to be 8 years old. John and Sarah go for a date and leave him with a babysitter named Zoe. After watching TV, Zoe offers to play hide and seek with Miles before putting him to bed. When he goes to hide, he loosens a light bulb to the basement. Zoe walks down the stairs to find him while barefoot, eventually stepping on a broken glass and getting a large shard stuck in her foot. When Sarah talks to Miles about it, he claims that he didn't even remember playing the game, let alone how Zoe ended up downstairs with a bloody foot. As Miles sleeps later that night, Sarah enters his room and heard him whisper, "Go F yourself." He starts speaking Hungarian again before waking up startled. Sarah suggests that he had a bad dream, but he says that he was having a good dream. Another incident occurs at school when Miles wants to do a project with a girl, but she is already working with another boy. Miles goes to the janitor's closet and grabs a wrench before bringing it back to class to hit the boy. Miles is then taken to see a psychologist named Dr. Elaine Strasser. She later meets Sarah and a colleague named Arthur Jacobson. They review Sarah's tape of Miles speaking Hungarian, and Arthur says it's a rare dialect that only a small portion of the Hungarian population speaks. This translates into something threatening and insulting towards a woman. Arthur tells of a time he went to India and talked to a 6-year-old boy named Padman, who claimed to have remembered his previous life, including his siblings, his mother's favorite song, and when he died from drowning. He suggests that Miles has a separate personality in his head and that they need to let Miles be himself before the dark personality becomes dominant. Sarah dismisses what the two say as absurd, but they give her a CD that contains a video to watch of a similar case. Tallulah, the family dog, disappears. John takes Miles searching the streets to find him, and Miles begins making disturbing comments alluding to Tallulah's being dead, as well as the abuse John suffered at the hands of his father. John confronts Sarah about this as he thinks she said something to Miles, but they discover that the boy has placed a camera behind a photo of them to spy on them. After Miles later suggests that John had been abusing him, John angrily gets out of the house and stays elsewhere for a while. Sarah wakes up at night and finds Miles at the end of the hallway crying for her. She calls him to run towards her, but as he runs in the dark, he quickly transforms into Skarka and grabs Sarah. This is just a nightmare that she wakes up from. Miles then enters her room and asks to sleep beside her for the night. Miles lays down beside her and reaches for her arms. He asks Sarah if she will always love him no matter what he does, and Sarah hesitantly replies yes. Soon, Sarah notices flies buzzing around the room and most of the house. She goes down to the basement and smells something awful. There's blood on the floor and a rotted severed paw. Sarah sees something below propped up by a wooden plank and knows that Tallulah is inside. She tries to lift the board until Miles brings her a hammer to use. Sarah pulls the plank off and Tallulah's body spills out. Her throat was cut. After John returns to find out more, they decide to do whatever it takes to get Miles back to normal. Sarah takes Miles to visit Arthur. He meets with Miles privately to hypnotize him and bring out Miles' good personality before Skarka's personality takes over. Miles looks possessed and starts scratching on the chair before Skarka starts talking for Miles, and he threatens Arthur that he will make it look like Arthur drugged and molested Miles if he tries to heal him. He orders Arthur to tell Sarah that the process is not working. After they leave, Arthur notices that Miles had managed to scratch Skarka's name off the couch. Arthur called Sarah late at night to ask her to look up the name Skarka on the computer where Miles could not see her. She finds out that Skarka was a mass murderer who murdered multiple women and always severed and kept one of their hands as a trophy. Skarka also had heterochromia and died 15 minutes before Miles was born. Arthur figures that Skarka could have returned because he feels that he has unfinished business. Sarah enters Miles' room and finds that he, or Skarka, has kept newspaper clippings and articles about Margaret, who later wrote a memoir about her ordeal with Skarka. Sarah realizes that Skarka's soul still lingers because of her unfinished business as Margaret. John and Sarah prepare to take Miles to the hospital to help him. As John drives him away from home, he begins to tearfully tell Miles that he loves him. The boy responds by cutting John's seatbelt with scissors, then stabs John in the hip, causing John to fall into a tree. Sarah finds them in the hospital and the doctor tells her that John needs to be put in a coma for a few weeks as the swelling in his brain goes down. Sarah decides it is time to end this once and for all. She takes Miles and gives him sleeping pills so he won't see her go to a shop to buy a gun. She drives to Margaret's house and pretends to be a victim inspired by her book to get Margaret to let her in. After talking, Sarah goes to the bathroom and vomits because she is not ready to kill an innocent woman. She loads her gun and pointed it at Sarah, but in the end, she couldn't pull the trigger. Margaret later finds that Miles has broken in and is holding a knife. He says the same line to her that Skarka did when she met him, about his different color eyes. Miles stabs Margaret and knocks her to the ground, stabs her again in the stomach and then slashes it before he scolds her that she should have run away from him. Sarah tries to help Margaret, but it's useless. She runs after Miles as he crosses a field. Sarah shouts at Skarka and asks why is he still here if his job is done. He tells her that the young Miles was gone by the time Sarah said she would love him no matter what he did, and that Skarka was now in complete control of the body. Sarah pulls out a gun to shoot him, but she is shot by a neighbor. Skarka disguises as an innocent boy and runs to the man to comfort him as Sarah slowly dies. Sometime later, Skarka, still deceiving others as Miles, is taken in by a foster family. The mother invites him inside and he concentrates on her hands. When the boy goes up to his room, he looks in the mirror to see Skarka's reflection staring back at him.